Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Jody Lynn, I was just noticing, it's been a while since we've had a medical person on the show. You'll remember over the last year we had well over a dozen, which was kind of a record, right? But we haven't had anybody on in a while. So I think the fates were saying, okay, it's time to bring somebody else in to talk about this health stuff because it is pretty important. And so that's where we get Dr. Cody Golman joining us today. And Dr. Cody, first of all, welcome. How you doing today?
I'm fantastic, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, guys, and thanks for the great podcast.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Now, you self-describe as a quantum life and health coach. I'm always loving it whenever I see the word quantum come into anything, particularly a designation or a title. How do you bring that one in? Like, when you're saying quantum life and health coach, what is that meaning?
Well, it's a loaded question, but to try to keep it simple, I've been studying metaphysics since I was 21. I was exposed to a work called concept therapy by a gentleman named Dr. Thurman Fleet from 1931. And his mission was to really bring people these metaphysical principles. So when we say quantum has many definitions, but it can mean the smallest particle or smallest unit of energy. Mm-hmm. Of what we think existence is made up of. And so that's really what it points to. It points to outside of the illusion of what we see with good and bad and pluses and minuses. Good and bads are literally illusions. They're not real. They feel real. But when you move into quantum realm, you have more possibilities. And if you move into what's behind the thing you think you're looking at, that's where it gets really fun. So that's where the word quantum comes from for me and quantum coaching.
Okay. And where does that tie into health from your perspective?
Well, for many, many years, I was obsessed with achieving cosmic consciousness. I read multiple books on it, and I didn't achieve it because when you read the stories of cosmic consciousness, most people achieve it by 30. And I was about 35, and I said, shoot, I'm not going to make it. And I thought that was the only way you could get there. And I basically, in 2019, I got so sick and so ill. I was a health professional coaching people and became a chiropractor and worked with thousands of patients to heal them from cancers and sickle cell anemia and diseases that were supposed to be incurable. Mm-hmm. But when I got sick, I was sick for a year and a half. I was in bed for 6 months. I didn't walk for 6 months. And You start learning more than books can teach you in those moments. And the question of cosmic consciousness, the answer came in that illness. And it wasn't from where I thought it was going to be. And so it's interesting when you start tying all that in together. I had the cognition that I never lived in my body. I always lived outside of my body. I thought that was the cool thing to do. I'll just tell you, not the cool thing to do. The magic is not in somewhere out there. The magic is right here. In this time space reality is where the juice is. It's where the magic is. Everyone's trying to seek spirituality when the entire time, if you remove time and space and you look at where you just came, you were dying. You're craving to come here. So I realized that health, there is no one who's achieving higher levels of consciousness without their health. Without that, you're not achieving it. You're not even searching for God. You're searching for survival. So that's why I focus on health, and that's why I moved that into that space.
Now, let's talk also, I always like to define terms, and I think we kind of grasp what the term cosmic consciousness is. But let's define it. When you say cosmic consciousness, what does that exactly mean to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I love defining words because we throw out words, and half of us don't even know what they even mean.
Right? Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
Sometimes we invent them.
No, those aren't bad at all. There's a proven way to increase your IQ. My father did it when I was a kid. He used to look up 10 words a day, and I just thought he was kind of nerdy. And now I do the same thing. Every word I hear, I look up. Words have 6 different meanings, and it's a proven way to increase your IQ, your intelligence level. So, cosmic, that's a big word, right? So what the hell does that even mean? And depends on what lenses you're looking through to define that. But if we were to really, let's answer this from the macro and the micro. If you were to take us or my body or our bodies and break it down to the most tiny little element, and you look at it and you go, man, I can't even see it. Is it a wave or is it a particle? And so you go, well, I can't figure out what it is, but there's something there that seems to be some kind of intelligence. It's quite powerful, but I don't see what it is. And then if you come out of the micro and go to the macro, if you look at just Earth and our solar system, I don't know if you've seen the most recent James Webb telescope.
James Webb telescope. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. In one image, 7,000 galaxies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are a tiny dot on a planet in one galaxy. And you go, well, wait a minute. So when I feel into cosmic consciousness, our minds cannot conceive of that word cosmic. It's like trying to conceive what God is. It's the finite mind trying to conceive the infinite. So it's the nothingness of the what. And when you feel into that, you go, what the hell is that? It's the thing that is incomprehensible. And so we're trying to comprehend the thing that we can't comprehend. It can't be done with mind, but I do believe who you are as a soul can comprehend what this is. So if you could become aware of all that was, all that is, and you're aware of what is behind all, that would be cosmic.
I love the fact that you brought up the James Webb telescope. I believe it's currently about, I can't remember, it's either 100,000 or a million. I think it's 1 million miles away from Earth at this point. But it's way, way out there. It's out in the middle of the deep black. And I remember when they first brought it online, first of all, that was a big thing because it actually worked. They actually were able to put the whole thing together. It functioned perfectly. It didn't have a Hubble problem where there was a problem with focus or anything like that. It just all worked. And the first thing they did is they pointed it at a piece of space. Now, you have to understand, astronauts will tell you when you're out in space, you see a whole lot more stars than we see here on Earth because the atmosphere blocks so much of the light. But out there, you see a tremendous amount. And yet even out there, they can see what they think of as black areas where there just don't seem to be any stars. So they pointed the telescope at a black area. And when they were done taking the image, it was like you described, it was just absolutely filled with galaxies that couldn't even be seen by the naked eye. It just wasn't even possible. And yet there they all were. When I heard about that, that's when I think it finally sunk in with me just how vast this universe really is. I mean, Carl Sagan comes to mind. Billions and billions. I mean, and he was talking about galaxies. He wasn't even talking about stars. He was talking about galaxies.
Yeah, exactly. It is about 1 million miles away. That's where it is right now. And it's just, if people haven't seen this, you got to go look at it. It will, if you don't look at that picture and just have tears of gratitude and it makes you want to cry because you go, oh my God, I see how vast this thing is. And whatever is controlling and coordinating that, I mean, it makes me go, I'm done searching for this thing is. Let me just live my life because
right.
I can't conceive what this is. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I love the fact that you also pointed to the micro and the micro being molecular and smaller level, level of size so small that, like you say, physicists can't even decide, is it a wave? Is it a particle? What is it? What's going on there? There's string theory. They can't even tell us what string theory is. They've come up with string theory. They can't, there's no way to disprove string theory. So there's nothing that can ever be proven. Not that anything can ever be proven in science anyway, but there's no way to prove it or disprove it. So they've all kind of left it aside, but they can't leave it alone because it seems to work. So it's that kind of nonsense. The physicists have a hard time with it. Which I think why we tend to bring metaphysics into it because, well, when science can't explain what the data is and you bring the metaphysicians in, they have an explanation every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that really was why I started off with kind of that concept of my 20s being obsessed with cosmic consciousness. I'm like, there's many books written about it and you go, what the heck is this? It's really, could you put the lenses of God on and look through those lenses if that's possible? And, it's interesting because I was obsessed with this, but in the time I got ill, I started really understanding how to apply these things because we can study metaphysics and I had done this and I was teaching courses, but I only understood it mentally. So mentally trying to comprehend metaphysics is really a funny thing. Yeah. I was mentally strong, but I was emotionally infantile because there are things I could not feel. And again, that's a big deal because there's, when you look at head-heart coherence, there's some aspect of this where feelings come into play and it's not just thoughts because these are different wavelengths. The mind, I've noticed, cannot, and this, I want you guys to feel into this statement, because this is something that I channeled and downloaded. Our minds have never really experienced an emotion, truly to actually experience an emotion. Our minds have classified an emotion, and our minds give us a lot of stories about what emotions are, but it's never really experienced emotion, because the mind is capable of tuning into wavelengths of thought. But wavelengths of emotions are a different wavelength. It doesn't have the capacity to tune. So when you're really feeling that, you go, okay, there's a piece of understanding and information that we tune in with that we don't use with mind, that we actually use with what I like to call the e-sense, the essence, the ability to actually sense energy. And I think emotions are the initial gateway into actually accessing that.
So we're obviously off on a discussion here about the nature of energy, both in its EMF form and in its spiritual form. And that's always been a fascinating subject as far as I'm concerned. But we also are tying this into health. So let's look at this from the health perspective. I mean, you told us how you went through your own health crisis, and clearly it has become a big part of your life because you're Dr. Cody Golman. I mean, you're I believe it's chiropractic is your field, but you're basically into the field of how do we build and maintain better levels of health. So how does this whole quantum cosmic consciousness thing fit in as far as you're concerned?
Yes, Walt, thanks for bringing this back home, because we can go so many directions with this. So this is really an important piece of this, is I explained about being sick, and I'll probably give you some of the details of that, because there'll be some great metaphysical principles. But as I mentioned, I used to live outside of my body and just didn't really acknowledge it as being that important, to be honest with you. I used to think it was a moldable plastic clay-like substance, and yes, in one essence, it kind of is.
It is, yeah, really.
It is, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. You have 220 glands. Each gland produces 1,000 to 100,000 chemicals. Your body alone creates more pharmaceuticals and more chemicals than any pharmaceutical company on the planet.
Boy,
these are the things, right? These are the things I think this is what should be taught in school. This should be taught in school, not the stuff that's being taught to the American public is that our bodies are really not powerful, that you need something on the outside to put in for it to be healthy. And it is so not true. You're circulating 60,000 miles of arteries and veins, and each little blood cell is bringing oxygen and nutrients to every single tissue you have. I mean, if that doesn't make you just drop to your knees in awe, I don't know what will. But there is a power source that is so intelligent. It built this thing. Every 7 years, every single bone cell you have rebuilds. People have a brand new skeletal system every 7 years. So the intelligence that's inside you, rebuilding you, I love getting people acquainted with that. And the first place to really understand health is to really understand that power. When you understand that your nose running, or you coughing, or you having a fever, is the God-given mechanism of cleaning out toxins, you start realizing, oh my gosh, we got this thing backwards. I don't need to stop my nose from running. I need to make sure I let the infinite intelligence inside me do its thing. So I spent over the last 20 years, not only as a chiropractor, but I built a healthcare center here in Denver. And in that time, I started watching people. I was never interested in weight loss. It was not interesting to me. But I watched people do Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers and metabolic centers and Ozempic and all these absolutely unhealthy programs. I'm going to say that out loud. Yes, I'm saying it on air, on public. They're unhealthy. 80% of weight loss programs, this is a fact, 80% of weight loss programs in America fail, meaning when you do a weight loss program, 80% of the time you're going to gain it back. And that was frustrating for me to see patients go through this. And every time they did it, it got harder to lose weight and they got more and more unhealthy. So that's where I have a few doctors and myself, we got together and created actually a healthy weight loss program. Because as I mentioned, I love igniting, inspiring people to the highest potential. But without a healthy body, you're not seeking your highest life purpose. You're just not. And so being sick made me realize, oh, this thing's a little more important than I thought. Right? So that's where I got off in that direction, and that's why we really moved in this way of the weight loss company.
Okay, you did kind of tease us with something that, of course, the weight loss industry loves to hit upon, which is this idea of losing weight and so many, like you said, so many people complaining that they gain it back. But there seems to be no agreement as to why people gain it back, other than many people claiming, well, they're eating. Well, of course they're going to gain it back. They're taking the caloric intake in. But that doesn't really answer anybody's question. So let's go directly at it. Why do people gain the weight back?
Okay, this is a really good question. Let's first understand when we say weight loss, this really is inaccurate because there's 3 types of weight that you can lose: water, muscle, and fat. So it's very important when you're talking about weight loss. If a company or a program is telling you to lose weight, run the other direction. Because you need water. We're not going to, water is going to fluctuate up and down.
Right.
You need your muscle.
Oh, yeah.
But many programs will actually create muscle loss. The kind of weight loss you need is fat loss. So let's talk about fat loss specifically. You guys will love this. Everyone's born into this incredible body as a fat burner. Most people don't know that fat is God's most amazing fuel source for you. When you are burning fat, your mind is on track. You are sharp. You're in your genius mode when you're burning fat.
Interesting.
When your body burns fat, you wake up energized without coffee. You have sustained energy throughout the day, and you go to bed and you sleep like a rock. That is the result of being a fat burner. That's why God intended you to be a fat burner. That's what it's there for. It's jet fuel. Fat has more than double the energy units than a protein or carbohydrate.
Interesting.
Okay, now when I say energy units, I said it like that because you pointed to something very important: calories.
Which is heat energy.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. But here's the interesting piece. Most of our education in our country has been around calories being bad. That's like saying it's bad for you to drive around with a full gas tank.
Yeah.
It's the
Good
same
way of describing that, yeah.
It really is. So we need to make sure your gas tank is full. So calories, as you said, is a measurement, a unit of energy, which is how you actually power up your body. You need calories, okay? So when we look at it from the standpoint of fat as our primary, most amazing fuel source, there's actually references in many different Bibles as to fat and why it is our best fuel source. Over the years, there's something called the food guide pyramid. You might remember that, Walt.
Oh, I remember that one. Sure.
Yeah. And then Jody Lynn, I don't know if you follow this, but the food guide pyramid at the very bottom said your primary servings of calories should be bread, cereal, rice, and pasta.
Yep.
Okay. And at the very top, at the very tip of this pyramid, it said sparingly fats and oils. So this is over 30 years. The American population thought that it was a good idea to eat bread, cereal, rice, and pasta as their primary diet. And there's a lot of history as to why that is. But what this did, whatever you give your body over time, it eventually will become efficient at burning. Okay. So if we point directly to what's happening, I'll guide us in the brain centers. There are certain brain centers. One is called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is responsible for many hormones, but 2 of them are called leptin and ghrelin. Leptin and ghrelin are responsible for telling you when you're full and when you're hungry, okay, and when to stop eating. When those 2 hormones are pointed towards fat, you're on track. You're doing great mentally, emotionally. I didn't mention emotions, by the way. When you burn fat, you don't have high anxiety or low depressions. It doesn't exist. You have fluctuation, but you don't have those, right? This is interesting. So here's where I'm going with all this. Over the years of eating bread, cereal, rice, pasta, those are things that turn into sugar, including alcohol turns into sugar. Over the years of it, your body actually flips from fat and it turns over to sugar. Sugar becomes your primary fuel source. So how do you know if you are a sugar burner or a fat burner? It's really easy. Okay. If you're a sugar burner, here's the list of things. You have more anxiety, more depression, more ups and downs. That's number 1. Number 2, you need coffee to get up in the morning. Number 3, your sleep is interrupted. Number 4, you have joint pains or body aches. Number 5, you have digestive disturbances like dysbiosis or gut bacteria problems. And if I was to take those few things and expand it out into our medical model, you could list off about 1,000 diagnoses, and I'm listing to you guys the cause of these diseases. Most diagnoses aren't causes. And it's important for people to hear this, that diagnosis comes from the Latin word, di means two, agnosis comes from the word guess, Latin. Two people guessing. So, right? Patient goes, "Doc, my elbow hurts." Doctor goes, "That is tennis elbow." Tennis elbow? What in the is tennis elbow? I'm going to keep this clean for everybody. But what is that? So these are guesses. And I want people to understand, when they get a diagnosis, you're not getting a cause. You're getting a labeled effect. So as we wire this back, sugar, becoming a sugar burner is one of the most root causes for the physical body of both physical and mental disorders. So we'll kind of go from there.
All right. Well, now you've got me thinking. You got me thinking a lot. Just speaking for myself, in the last year, I became my 23-year relationship. My marriage fell apart and got divorced. Leading up to that, the last probably most of the marriage, actually, my ex was very much of a sugar person and always wanted to have her dessert every day and so forth. And of course I was married to her, so I kind of got into that habit. So over time, I could even feel it. I could feel myself getting this sugar addiction going on. So since the marriage ended, I've been really consciously focusing on cutting down on the sugar and trying to take some pounds off. And I did. I was like 35, 40 pounds overweight by that point, which was odd for me because I always had a pretty high metabolism. But now all of a sudden I had this new thing going on. Over the last couple of years, I've managed to take all but about 5 or 10 pounds off. I'd actually gotten down to about 5 at the last few weeks. I've let it slip back up again. But it did raise for me the question, why is it so easy to put the weight back on? And I guess from what you're telling me, I apparently to some degree have become something of a sugar burner over that time period. Now I suspect I'm also a fat burner. I suspect, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I suspect we really do both. It's probably a question of, how much of one, how much of the other for any given person. Am I wrong about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're definitely right. Yeah, we certainly have both, and we have modes of both. And like, you're born as a fat burner, but that's the key. Whatever you give your body enough of, eventually it becomes efficient at burning. That's the key. So yeah, you slowly, almost like a dial, you kind of go less fat, less fat, less fat, more sugar. But this is an important piece of this is, you guys, I'm sure you understand neuroplasticity. Mm-hmm. Your brain becomes wired to burn sugar. If you do it long enough, you literally have neuronal connections, and you probably know this well, but sugar is as addictive as cocaine. There's the same receptors in the brain as cocaine, and so drugs, alcohol, sex, those things release dopamine in the brain. So it's very important for people to understand. It's not just, hey, it's just sugar. It's actually a dopamine addiction is what happens. It's why you mentioned about your ex-wife. Dopamine is the chemical that if we go back into the brain and look at the primitive brain centers called the amygdala, these are inherited from our animal ancestors. We haven't really evolved that much in the last few thousand years. We still have those primitive brain centers. Those primitive brain centers were responsible for survival. And the way they did that was by avoiding pain and chasing pleasure. That's the basic function. Avoiding pain, chasing pleasure. Now, it's important to understand, though, at this day and age, back as a primitive, animal, if you walk by a cave and something was about to attack you, it was important that you ran. Okay.
Oh, sure.
But the problem was, what if your true soulmate was in another dark cave? You'd never find him because you're avoiding the cave. So we then, what our brains did was we began to evolve in the higher brain centers, the cerebral cortex and the frontal lobe, which is where we have advanced thinking and problem solving. But the reason I bring all this up to tie us together is that dopamine is still being released in the brain and giving us a sense of reward. So when you eat a donut, you literally have the feeling that you did something great with your life. You've really accomplished something. You'll see that.
There are a lot of people who would agree with that, by the way.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm from New Orleans, and I love beignets, Cafe Du Monde down there, and I ate a ton of them. And you go, wow, I've really accomplished something good with my life. So it's interesting because to understand this, I think is really important that people understand this neurology, because it's not just, oh God, the sugar is good, is you are literally operating like an animal. We have animal parts. We don't disown them. Let's love them. You have an animal part, but knowing when you want to reach for the sugar to feel better, this is why many people go through the stress response and reach for sugar. What they're doing is trying to just dump dopamine in the brain. And if you really get that, you go, wow, okay, how do I move through this without operating my animal centers?
Yeah, is there another way to accomplish the same goal without sugaring myself?
Exactly. And I love this conversation because what happens is it really brings people out of the animal brain and into the higher evolved brain centers. This is why we have them. How do I get into problem solving? And so one of the biggest reasons, and I'm kind of go through a little bit of explanation to really answer your question in detail, why do we gain the weight back, is yes, number one, you're a sugar burner, but the reason it's so hard to get off is because you're getting rewarded. Remember I was telling you that primitive brain centers are there to help you avoid pain and chase pleasure? So check this out. You guys are going to love this, okay? I have found that most people, I'd say close up to 99% of people, do not know how to sit in a painful emotion.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
It's important. And our ancestors basically recorded in the brain painful emotions as non-survival. So now it's important to see this because you go, well, let me avoid, what do we avoid? Sadness, anger, depression, anxiety. We want to avoid all these things, right? But these are just frequencies and wavelengths that are trying to communicate to you. So one of the biggest things I can say is when people avoid feeling those negative feelings, they do it by actually trying to find something that will dump dopamine in the brain. But the way around this is I love to teach people in our program to sit in an emotion, to sit in specifically a negative emotion. Almost no one's ever done that. So when someone tells me, Dr. Golman, I'm doing this program, I'm losing weight, but I feel like I want a cookie. I say, great, go sit on the couch and sit in the feeling of not having the cookie. And they go, oh my God, I've never done that before. I'm like, yes, because in your primitive brain centers, you've avoided feeling bad, right? So we have people go sit on the couch and they don't even know what to do. They're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? Go into the feeling. And when you go in, you turn yourself in and you go into the feeling and you go, oh, this is terrible. And I tell them, guide them through, find it in your body, find the feeling, the energy in your body. Oh, this is horrible, Doctor. What do I do? I can't do this. They go, good. Stay with it. And eventually what happens is it releases. Whatever you face and let move through you does not have control over you. You just learned how to move from the primitive brain centers into your more advanced frontal lobe and start using higher cognitive function. This is why I first started talking to you guys about emotions and why they're so important to advanced human functioning. So when we kind of tie all this together, now you get the bigger picture. Well, yes, number one, you're a sugar burner, but number two, if you haven't actually trained yourself to sit in something that you perceive as bad, which is just so juicy. You came here to experience pleasure and pain. It's an absolute illusion for people to think they're going to experience pleasure all their life. Matter of fact, that addiction to trying to experience pleasure brings more pain than anything. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that you think you're going to have all good without bad. It does not exist. The universe is wired in pluses and minuses equally. That's why we are established in a very stable universe right now.
There's also an interesting duality. We do have duality. It's also an interesting fact that if you're a sugar burner and you try to feed yourself more dopamine with the sugar, it's amazing how poor the quality of that dopamine is. It doesn't satisfy. I think it's why people keep going back for more and more and more. I've been asking all the questions here. Jody Lynn, I'm sure you got stuff going on in your mind. What are you thinking about right now?
Oh yeah. I feel like we've been all over the map here. We started with, you were talking about, looking outside of yourself and going outside of yourself. And then I can't remember, I didn't get a chance to write it down, but you were talking about when you got sick, you kind of went within, and that's when you really learned to take the metaphysical from the mind and bring it into reality. And I don't know that you didn't call it that, but I want to understand more about that and what that looked like on your journey.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. And this is great because we really can tie this in. I wanted you guys to really understand this, and people listening, is all physical changes. You can't change your physical body without making a neurological change. So that really answers the question about why do I gain the weight back? If you didn't change your neurology, you're going to do the same thing. Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So now in kind of guiding into your question, Jolene, I was a little background. I was a very positive person. I thought that you were supposed to be all positive. Okay. And I was very infatuated with the positive side of life. I was teaching positivity. I was preaching positivity. I was the epitome of it, of the fantasy of positivity. When someone is polarized, you talked about duality. I knew about the universal law of duality. The universal laws are amazing. I had them all running in my mind, but I didn't understand a damn thing about them truly. Okay. So I said, I understand duality, but I'm still going to choose the positive one. Well, there's a few things about about universal laws. Universal laws never break. It's you who breaks. So trying to hold on to one polarity will swing you, because there's another law called the universal law of rhythm. Mm-hmm. And it says that the more you try to be positive, the more you'll swing into the negative. Now, I heard it, but I didn't believe it. I said, nope, I can override universal laws. This leads me into, trying to be the model of health, the model of positivity for people, teaching seminars. And I was seeing 325 patients for over 15 years a week. Right. And so, what happens is
I'm dividing that out. That's a crazy week.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. That was just me, 325 patients. I had a team of people around me running the business, running the office.
Yeah, but still, that's a lot.
How many hours would you have to work to do that?
12 and a half hours a week.
Whoa. Man.
Wow.
Long 12 and a half hours a week, work week. We had systems in place to do that. I saw my adjustments were 33 seconds or under, and we had phenomenal results because healing doesn't take time. That's the illusion.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that probably another time, right? But,
oh my gosh.
Right. So to get back to this, you can hear me holding this positive polarity. Well, eventually, I have multiple companies, but I was in China and I got a parasite, and the parasite began to, over the course of a few months, eat my nutrients. But I'm Mr. Positive. I said, nope, I got all the energy in the world. I did my affirmations, but I didn't listen to my body, right? I started getting tighter and tighter. I was bit by a tick when I was 17. And as most people know, Lyme bacteria becomes dormant in your system until you get your immune system so low that it's released. So Lyme bacteria was then released. When that happened, I started getting more and more tired. And over the course of a few months, I'm getting so sick and so tired, but still got my positive affirmations, right? I'm still trying to teach and do the things. I'm trying to be positive. But eventually, when your health is taken away, you lose all positivity. And this is where this comes in, Jolene. The things that I want you to say this statement and people to hear this, the things you criticize, whatever you criticize, you will eventually become it yourself, attract someone like it, or breed it in your kids.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, I heard that statement, but I intellectualized it. I said, sure, that applies to everyone else. I'm sure that doesn't apply to me. Well, I used to judge
that part of living outside your body, I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. Now you're understanding about that, right? I'm like, right. So here's the piece of this is that I used to judge people who are sick. I said, just change your thoughts. I judged people who had parasites. Parasites, that's bullshit. I judged people who had bacteria. That's bullshit. Come on, guys. Change your thoughts. Change your life. I didn't believe in that stuff. Well, when you look at it from this angle, I was basically becoming the things I judged. I judged people who were slow, literally slow. I was a fast-moving person. That's the way to live. I judged people who were negative. I judged people that got up and drank coffee in the morning because they were tired. The things I judged, I became over the course of a year and a half. And in a few months, I was bedridden. I contacted as many healthcare providers as possible in the natural. I spent probably at that point almost $35,000 to $45,000 in natural healthcare. Didn't do a damn thing. I used to judge medical doctors because I said, oh, they're drugging people up. Well, now I had to go see medical doctors. I had to become the thing I judged. And over the course of time, none of those drugs worked. None of the metaphysical teachings I taught for over 10 years to people did a damn thing. None of my positivity worked. No affirmations, I was starting to talk to every religious figure I could think of. Jesus, Buddha, Allah, Guama, anyone who would listen.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody. Nothing worked, okay? And this is where it gets very interesting, is it was in the moment, I'm having these cognitions that, oh my God, I have literally been trying to be positive and I'm becoming all the things that I despised. Becoming all the things I criticized. It's very important. The things that you have criticized in your life about others are simply disowned parts of yourself. Very important that people hear that, okay? So as I started getting worse and worse, the bacteria released into my brain. So now I could not have cognitive function. I couldn't spell my name. And you want to really talk about big, deep states of fear, have your body shut down where you're laying in bed and now remove your mind. And where do you go when you have no functioning body and no functioning mind? Where do you go? I spent a few weeks over my body watching myself because I used to escape in my mind, but the mind's now poisoned. Mind's poisoned. I can't think straight. So where do you go?
It's a fear environment, really.
Yeah, pure, just my God, everything that I judged, sick people, negative people, and to be very vulnerable, I wanted to kill myself at this point. I said, what's the point of living in a body that you can't move in? What's the point of being in a mind you can't think with? And I tried multiple times to kill myself. By the way, I used to judge people who commit suicide, said, just lighten up and be happy with life. Now I'm that guy. I became everything that I criticized in others. And man, I was in a deep, dark place, right? But here's the moment of really shift. And in the moment, I said, I just want to die. Just take me now. Take me now. And I have an aunt who lives with cerebral palsy, full body cerebral palsy, who talks like this and can barely move her body. I came downstairs and I told my mom, I'm ready to die. I want to be taken away. And she said to me, you know, your Aunt Janelle used to say that, except she had her condition every single day of her life, and she's now 72. And I thought, son of a bitch, this has only been 6 months. And I'm like this. Now I'm going, am I just a complainer? Like everything just was like rewiring in my brain. I'm going, I don't understand what's even happening here. Things got worse and worse and worse to the point where I decided I could feel death calling. I could literally feel darkness and death. And I decided to let it in. I decided to let the thing that I was avoiding in. The things that we think are so dark and bad for us are the disowned parts of self. It's the other half of God. So when I first told you you want to achieve cosmic consciousness, if you really want to understand and feel what God is, you got to let all parts of self in. Because in almost every major religion, it says, I created heaven and hell. I created good and bad. If you want to experience me, you need to widen your range of frequency and experience all the things that are coming to you. Let all things move through you. But the primitive brain centers want to avoid pain and chase pleasure. You see how we're starting to evolve back out to these higher evolved brain centers where it's going, okay, wait a minute. I'm going to actually be with my pain. When I let the darkness in, when I let death in, I can't tell you the feeling. I started feeling life again. We're talking over 6 months in bed, bedridden, not walking. I didn't go outside and walk. I could crawl to the bathroom, back and forth to the shower in the bathroom. That's what I did. My mom and dad at 40 had to come live with me to take care of me. I had a 6-month-old baby who I didn't lift up or touch for 6 months because I couldn't even think straight. And that moment of letting darkness in is when I started feeling life come back in. And you want to talk about confusing as hell. Letting death in, and now you feel life?
Yeah.
Jody Lynn, you pointed to polarity and duality. This is now how I started understanding duality. I no longer... Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say, Walt?
I was just going to say what you're talking about reminds me of something that I've been working on for a number of years now. And this is helping me to get some more clarity about it. I've tried to adopt an attitude of appreciation for what I don't like. And that's not easy. It's not easy at all. But I like the way you're describing how you go about doing it, because what you're really saying is that I think you're describing it in terms of, well, let it in. And that's a good way to describe it. I think the way I'm thinking about it is let it be for what it is. Mm-hmm. It's okay that it is. It's not something that needs to be changed. Just let it be. And in that sense, yeah, let it in, because that's where you get the true appreciation.
Yeah. I love where you're going with this, because, you know, when you really look at this duality, to really give an accurate picture of this, if we polarize ourselves to positive, you must attract the opposite. You're basically becoming a magnet for what you think you don't want. But the reason that's like that is because what you don't want in your life has just as many benefits as the thing you think you want. Mm. That's where it becomes very important.
And confusing too.
And confusing, right? Right. Mm-hmm. You go, exactly. Now, this is where, when we look at duality, remember we were talking about how both pluses and minuses, bads and goods, it's an illusion. It's false. Something you said, Walt, was very important about gratitude and appreciation. I want to point to something. So feel into this, okay? I let the darkness in and I started feeling life again. There was no need for the parasites or bacteria to be here anymore. They were here to help me find my parts of self I disowned. I began to love the darkness within. What I called dark and death and dying and critical and slow and all that shit I was judging, I began to love it. Therefore, I didn't need to have the dis-ease to bring me to that place of loving. When someone sees, if we look out in our reality and you see a thing, for positive, you're seeing the false aspect of it. When you look out and see that thing as negative, you're seeing the false illusionary aspect. But when you perceive that one thing with equal good and equal bad, something happens that's very special. It begins to blend into a third dynamic. That third dynamic is what I call love. True love and appreciation is not polarized. The love that I thought I was experiencing amongst people and in relationships was in fact infatuations with positivity. That's why so many relationships will swing back and forth. Love and appreciation is the synchronicity and synthesis of complementary opposites.
That's a really interesting insight. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Right, Jody Lynn? I mean, seriously. Wow.
It's beautiful.
It is. Yeah.
It's
a challenge too. Let's be honest. That's a challenging insight to live by and to adopt and to take in and be okay with. But boy, the power is evident. You can see it. You can feel it just by thinking about it.
True. Yeah. And even when you feel even as I'm talking about this, you guys can feel you have to breathe that in. Yeah. It's not something that's truly, I've seen a lot of this is not comprehensible by my mind, which was the big benefit of being so sick, was I got outside of my mind. Many people do psychedelics, do mushrooms and ketamine and MDMA to get outside of their mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a psychedelic experience to have that outside of mind. The mind is beautiful. The heart is beautiful, but to be outside of it is to go outside and experience something outside, and then to bring that information back in to start rewiring your mind to understand this was the only way I've been able to really do this. And this was terrible. This was an absolute terrible experience. I wouldn't wish on anyone to be in bed for 6 months. Like, it's the prison. I mean, you just want to die. There's no depiction of how that feels. And so again, when I'm talking about cosmic consciousness, I'm like, oh shit, I see now what I was asking for. I want to see the whole thing. And I know I'm seeing a sliver of it. I'm seeing a small sliver of it. But to truly bring that into really understanding where this goes in terms of health, you guys are going to love this. I want to kind of bring this picture, all this together, is that our body is a literal transcript of us. And we get feedback mechanisms when we are in tune or out of tune. Okay. And when I say in tune, you can use the word alignment, but it's not exactly what I'm talking about. When we get too prideful, we will attract feedback to bring us into shame. Why? So we can come back to the love and appreciation for that moment, experience, person, place, or thing. That's what the whole thing is about. There's so many stories and songs written about love, but this is a whole different dynamic of understanding this, right? When we get shameful of ourselves, we will attract a person, place, or thing to bring us into pride. Why? Because what life is trying to do is bring us into equilibrium to experience love and appreciation for that moment, person, place, or thing.
I'm reminded of a guided meditation that I was taught a few years ago as part of a program that was presented by actually a former co-host here on the show, and I became a part of that program. And in this meditation, it's a really cool meditation. Basically, you imagine yourself rising up off the earth, going off into the outer space, and you're going farther and farther away from Earth and then from our galaxy and so forth until it's this little tiny pinprick. And then you look back and you realize that you are a little tiny thing on that little tiny pinprick over there. And that's about how big your problems are. And that's how big your joys are. That's how big all of it is. So it's a way of giving yourself a perspective that takes all the sting out and takes all the euphoria out. And you can just kind of appreciate it for what it is. What you're talking about is kind of the next step in that meditation, because once you've attained that viewpoint, then the next step is to go in and appreciate both sides of it without feeling the angst and without feeling the euphoria. So you can actually just go right to the core of it.
Yes, I love what you're saying. That's a beautiful way to put it, and it's exactly it. I think let's kind of put this in perspective. What you just said. I spent 7 years trying to meditate. I did every single meditation, transcendental, art of living. I did all the meditations. Okay. After 7 years, I finally got to meditate. I can close my eyes and in 2 minutes I'm in meditation. But here's the interesting piece of it. I noticed, and I'm not saying this for everyone, but just feel into this. I was escaping my current reality in meditation. Mm-hmm. Well, wait a minute. Because the moment I come back, I go, boy, I feel great. Oh, the problems are still here. Meditation for me was a way for me to escape what I was feeling. So what I'm proposing to people now, I don't meditate anymore. I think it's a great, amazing skill set. I do. But I'm proposing quite the opposite, is to go into the thing that you think is so scary. Go into it. And how do you do that? It's actually the exact opposite of what we're doing. Most people think they have two options when it comes to an emotion. We think that either we can express or repress. That's what most people are doing. Repression leads to dis-ease and disharmony inside your body. If you repress an emotion, you are going to create dis-ease, because whatever you repress must be expressed somewhere else. I watched it for 15, 16 years with patients. They'd come in, Dr. Golman, my stomach's hurting me. I'd watch them as they push down the sheer fear and horror about an event they experienced, because now they're having a hard time digesting the experience. Therefore, their body is a literal transcript of what's going on inside your consciousness. Okay. That's option one, repression. Option two, expression. Guys go and punching bags. People yell. We go talk to a counselor, right? Now, again, I'm not saying you shouldn't talk to a counselor, but I want you guys to understand this. If you are expressing an emotion, you are not letting yourself feel it. This is going to be a big deal for people, and it's going to stir up a lot of ideas. Mm-hmm. But I've been through this quite a bit now, and with
you can do it both. I think you can probably do it both ways. You can express the emotion and feel it, but you can also express the emotion without feeling it.
You could, exactly. I think you're 100% right, exactly. And what I'm pointing to is a third option, which, by the way, yeah, good point. That third option is to allow. I've noticed that repression and expression for most people does not allow. And what the hell does that mean? People have heard of the word, of the concept of surrender. I heard that concept, but I didn't totally know what it meant. There's a great book by Michael Singer called Untethered Soul. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In that book, he describes this process. I read it about 16 times before I said, I don't know what in the hell this guy's talking about with surrender. But now I understood. In that moment of being really sick and you go, I'm just going to let death in. Now I understand surrender. It's you do the thing that is most scary to you. You let the thing that you're most scared of in. People go, oh my God. I have friends who are cage fighters. And I tell them what I'm doing. And they say, you're letting anger in? And I go, yeah. They goes, dude, I'm not doing that. That's scary. I'm like, you're a cage fighter. You'll like get in the ring with another person to beat you up, but you won't face your own emotions. And that's what I'm saying. Most of us are avoiding truly feeling. So when we look at the allow process, it's actually, as an example, a real life example, I used to go from relationship to relationship, feeling pain, feeling alone, and I would satisfy my dopamine addiction by just getting into another relationship, going on a date. It felt good until one day I go, oh my gosh, primitive brain centers, you're addicted to dopamine. So I decided to sit one day in the alone feeling. And I can even hear, as people are hearing this, to sit in the alone feeling is terrible. Oh my God, that's scary. But as I sat in the alone, I went in and actually felt alone. You'll literally feel yourself vibrate. You will literally feel the energy of the emotions that are there. Very, very important you do this, because when you allow them, the reason you'll even shake is because the stored potential energy becomes kinetic. No longer the energy that you stored, which was about to create some kind of dis-ease process, aka cancers, digestive problems, whatever it is starting to be released. People will yawn. They'll feel tired. They'll need to move. It's energy actually releasing. When you go into the emotion and you just sit with it and you allow it. I created a little 7-minute meditation myself or a dialogue to help my patients through this. And they just listen to it for 7 minutes. You go in, you relax into the emotion. And you'll notice what happens is it goes through a wavelength. It goes through, let's say it's alone. You go, oh my God, this is terrible. And your mind will talk. He goes, get me out of this. Get me out of this. This is horrible. It's terrible. And that's where people stop. If you go a little further, you'll go into the low potential of the wavelength. And you go, well, this wasn't so bad. This is not a big deal. You hear the mind talk at them. And if you go through that, you come to neutrality. So Walt, is a different way of what we were talking about with love. You can feel your way through duality and polarity. That's what's really interesting. When you allow both sides in, you will end up with a tear of gratitude. And all the things I did to try to create self-love, nothing really worked. No affirmations, no writing on the wall, no recordings. Sitting and feeling alone and letting the high potential, low potential moved me into states of love that I have no words for.
It's very interesting for a number of reasons, including I was mentioning that practice that I'd been to before. It's called the Taya practice. And that's one of the things that you do is you sit your way through an emotion. You feel it all the way through. One of the things that struck me about that whole process, it was really surprising the first few times just how quickly you move through it. That thing that you were holding off and, I don't want to go there and all that kind of thing. If you just let yourself go through it, it actually goes through pretty quickly. I thought it was going to take weeks. It took 5 minutes.
Right.
And it was a surprise. It was a real surprise.
That's a good point. Exactly. That's a great point. Yeah. And Jody Lynn, you kind of see how some of these things start tying into the metaphysics. Metaphysics becomes real when you let yourself dive into the process of both negatives and positives of the thing you think you want or don't want. So right. Go ahead. Yeah.
The image that popped into my mind as you were going through the wave, so to speak, was the slit test and something about observing it. When we observe the particle or the wave or whatever, it changes when we're observing it. And that's exactly what I thought of as you were going through that experience of the high, then the low, and then coming back. The key is to observe it, to be in it with it, and then come to that place of neutrality. That's so beautiful.
I love that you referenced that, Jody Lynn. If we were to take that example and really look at this from this angle, the double slit experiment, let's say you sit in an emotion. Let's say it's, you call it anxiety, and you get to this point of the wave and you go, no. And you stop there. That thing continues to be experienced as anxiety. So this was interesting with the double slit experiment is yes, it changed, but do you let yourself fully move through the process? And then if you get to the other side of the wave, you go, this is no big deal. Then your experience becomes that. But if you get to move through the low potential and the high potential, that's when you become back into the wave. In other words, particle in the middle of neutrality is the wave of possibility.
Jody Lynn just gave us mind exploding image.
Yeah, that's what I feel is going on in my mind. It makes total sense. I see people who, like we've talked about it on this show, Walt, where people can't understand or grasp why when somebody goes through something hard, they've found this gratitude in it. And we've both been through experiences where we've experienced this gratitude, but now I can see it physically, like that wave of like, it was scary. It was sucked at points. And then you go through this gratitude experience, and maybe perhaps you stayed there at that gratitude experience, or maybe you came back up just naturally to feel completely neutral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would propose to you that true gratitude is neutrality and is love, AKA. And this is what's really, really important to feel into. I've taken people, and of course this is a whole separate thing, but I've got a lady who's very Instagram famous. Her husband is a veteran. She married him. He died 30 days later after marrying him.
Oof.
Now, for the last 6 years, her whole Instagram post was about basically having his baby. They agreed we'd freeze his sperm because they knew he was going to die. And she basically spent the next 6 years trying to have his baby. But she's been in massive guilt, massive trauma. And she's going to see therapist after therapist talking out the story. This is a true story. I spent 2 hours in a conversation with her. The guilt and shame of 6 years was gone in 2 hours, and all she had was love and appreciation for her husband. And she within the next few months, allowed a new incredible man in, which they're getting married in May. I'm going to be at their wedding.
Wow.
And the way we did this was going in and finding, and sounds quite challenging, but if you find the benefits of the things, you see, when you perceive loss of something, you're only perceiving half of God. Mm-hmm. Because whenever you perceive loss, there's also equal gain. All I did was go and ask her questions in the moment of what you perceive losing, the specific traits or characteristic of that person. She perceived losing a best friend. We asked, where did the best friend form of him come in? She goes, oh my God, wait, my mom, my sister. She started seeing that you can't lose anything. You don't lose anything. It's impossible. She saw where the form of her beloved husband spread out immediately in quantum time frame, right? Into everyone who was there. When she saw that, she dropped her knees in love and appreciation, realized he never left in the first place.
Yeah. That's a great appreciation right there, because we are easily deceived by the illusion of death. We believe on some level, we like to convince ourselves, we like to say, metaphysically or spiritually, we believe that our life continues and so forth. But so often we really don't believe that, because the body stopped moving. I can tell it's no longer there. So it's a hard thing very often for us to recognize that they never really left. It's actually one of my favorite lines from the Harry Potter series, the last movie of Harry Potter. He's holding the Remembrance Stone, and he sees his mother and his father and Sirius and Lupin. They're all there, and he asks, I think it's his father, something to the effect of, where do you guys go? And the answer came back, we never left. We were always here. I mean, it's a graphic way. It's a metaphysical graphic way of expressing it, but it's really true. And it's one of the hardest things for us to grasp, especially when we're dealing with the angst and the grief associated with something. Exactly.
And that's really what I'm kind of getting at is this, we started out talking about cosmic consciousness and duality, and really, we went into talking about health. Is what's so fascinating is, to kind of almost put a capsule on this, is that when you look at the entire picture here, that your life has, you literally have 4 feedback mechanisms. When you are too on the positive side of things or the negative side of things, you have feedback mechanisms to bring you back into your authentic self. Mm-hmm. And it's your psychology. So your mind, you'll start your thoughts will balance you out. When you're too much in pride, you'll start having depreciating thoughts. When you're too in shame, you'll have self-lifting thoughts. You have your psychology, then your physiology. If you don't listen to your psychology, your body gives you feedback. Again, watch that for over 20 years with patients. That's why we had such good results, because I didn't buy into the illusion that they had a disease. That's absolute bull. It's absolute bull. What they had was the misconception of their reality. What they had was seeing one side of something that doesn't have one side. right? Seeing things as good or bad creates this feedback inside the body that creates disease. So you have psychology, you have physiology. If you don't listen to that, then you have sociology. You will literally attract people into your life to bring you back into equilibrium. And if you don't listen to that, you have something that's really cool. I like calling it universology. Universe will use anything, accidents, earthquakes, use whatever it can to bring you back into neutrality so you can actually live in your authentic self in the most inspired life with love.
This has, as usual, been an hour that flies by, and no exception today, right? Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious. So we kind of have to draw to a close here, but we need to do a couple things before we do that. First of all, you have a book. We haven't even mentioned the book. For
Not even.
It hasn't even come up. But tell people about the book. Tell people how they can reach you. Tell how people how they can find out more about what you've been talking about here.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that for you guys. But the book is called The 4 Secrets to Healthy Weight Loss. And as you can see, I've combined many, many years of psychology and metaphysics into helping people. You can get on Amazon, and we go through literally the 4 secrets behind weight loss and dispel the absolutely unhealthy things that are being taught to the public. That was my big purpose. I believe the first step to truly creating an inspiring life is with health. I can say confidently that without health, you in this time space reality, you've got nothing. You've got nothing. And I can say that's very true. So, you can go and get the book on Amazon. You can also check us out on the Fast 40 Weight Loss Program. That's the name of our company, Fast 40 Weight Loss. And if anything we've talked about is interesting, you also can go to drcodygolman.com, and we have masterminds and groups, that we coach, of people who are like-minded and want to expand and grow and really live a fulfilled life.
All right. We'll make sure we'll include a link to that too in the show notes too, to make it easier for people to find their way there.
Thank you, Walt.
But that's great information. One other thing that I make it a practice to do is, I started this about 2 years ago. I noticed that, first of all, I didn't have to notice this. It was pretty obvious. Everybody who comes onto the show is a giver. They've been through something, they've found something, they want to share it with the world. You know, they may be selling, they may be just giving it away, but there's whatever. They're giving, and they're putting out content. They're joining, podcasts, and they're doing social media posts, and they're doing blog posts, and they're writing books and all this other stuff. And it's being consumed by people that they never met, and they never seen, never will meet, never will see. And they don't get recognized for it. I said, whoa, wait a minute, we got to start recognizing that. So I make it a practice to say, on behalf of those people you've never met and you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been affecting in these very positive ways with all these ways you've been outreaching, thank you. Thank you for what you've been doing, because you've been making a real difference in this world.
Thank you for that. And you know what's interesting about what you just said was, before you started saying what you said, I could feel very, very high levels of gratitude, because wavelengths are traveling before words. And that was the same feeling I had for both of you. The exact same feeling I had, was before you even said it. I said, man, Jody Lynn, I can feel, how beautiful you are, both on the outside and the inside, and how caring you are. You have such a huge heart. It's almost like, if you would imagine, right? You can imagine Mother Nature just encapsulating you. It brings me to tears to just feel your energy as a woman.
Thank you.
That should be acknowledged. And so, yeah, you're welcome. And Walt, I can feel that. It's very, very cool to feel your guys' dynamic, because I can feel in the masculine presence, but also the sincere desire to know, and the humbleness to say, I can feel you, Walt. I don't know it all, but I'm learning. And
oh God, yeah. If I ever know it all, forget it. I'm done.
Yeah, exactly. But I appreciate both of you guys, and with both of what you're doing, you guys make it possible for people like us to express. And it's with utmost sincere love and appreciation for both of you.
So Jody Lynn, you know where I'm going next. This is the last piece always, every single day. And I always go to my co-host because, like, I tell you, Dr. Cody, I have like the best co-hosts in the world.
I believe it.
Jody Lynn's definitely one of them. These guys know how to get right to the core of the pith of the core of the pith. I mean, it's that really, it's that special. And I know she's going to come up with something, and it doesn't even matter what she comes up with. It's always right there. But Jody, what's it today? What's the one thing that's grabbing your attention today? It's like, the culminating point.
Oh my gosh. In a world where, people are trying to find themselves and trying to feel something, I think so often we're taught in our society to feel nothing, to chase that positivity, that illusion. And what you're talking about, Dr. Cody, is really coming back to homeostasis, which is really the purpose, I think, of this lifetime of humanity, is to experience both the duality of the good, quote unquote, and the bad, and see that there is none. It is all an illusion, and it is all just one.
Well, I think that was good. That was good. That word homeostasis, boy, did you just nail it. It was both inside the body. We usually tip with the body, but we talked about homeostasis in this time-space reality. That was awesome, Jodie. That was awesome. Couldn't agree more.
See, I have the best co-hosts in the world, Dr. Cody. I really do. I agree.
I agree. My favorite thing about both of you guys, seriously, is that you can hear what I'm saying. And it's a funny way to say that. But like, there's certain states of consciousness that I experienced. And I'm like, people don't know what I'm talking about here. And I'm a little bit alone, and you guys for sure make me feel right at home. And you are beings of like energy. That's all I'll say.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. So thank you, Dr. Cody, for joining us and for sharing and for, wow, you gave me some, I always love talking about how I get different perspectives from people every time. You just gave me a whole new perspective I hadn't thought of before. This is great. I'm really loving it. I mean, Jodie Lynn, seriously, I mean, we're experiencing all kinds of new perspectives, right? Where would you, I don't know about you. I rank this one like really, really high. Where do you rank this?
I also very, very high, to be really honest, Dr. Cody. There's been a few things that I've been struggling to put into perspective with my own coaching business and life, and like the illusion of reality. And you just like bonked me over the head with it. Like, like my life really, it feels like it makes sense now. Like I get it. Okay. Now I can move forward. So thank you for that too.
I'm experiencing tears and just breathing in what you're saying. That's powerful. That's powerful. That's so meaningful. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Cody, for bonking us. Thank you, Jodie Lynn, for being bonked. Thank you to our podcast bonking listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.